So we're here today with Christine Corrales from the San Joaquin Council of Governments. And Christine, go ahead whenever you're ready.
Hi. So as Veronica mentioned, my name is Christine. I'm a planner at the San Joaquin Council of Governments, also known as SJCOG or San Joaquin COG. And for those of you who don't know who SJCOG is, we're a regional forum for decision making among the different jurisdictions that make up the San Joaquin region. And so that includes cities of Escalon, Lathrop, Lodi, Manteca, Ripon, Stockton, and Tracy, as well as the county of San Joaquin. And our board is made up of elected officials from those jurisdictions who kind of help us make decisions on important regional issues. One of the important roles that SJCOG plays in the San Joaquin region is that we are the Metropolitan Planning Organization, or MPO, for San Joaquin County. And so what that means is that we're a federally mandated and we're a federally funded transportation policy making organization. That's what an MPO does. And one of the main things that an MPO works on is a metropolitan transportation planning process, where an RTP SCS is produced at the end of that process. And that happens every 4 years. So,
Christine, yeah. I don't want to interrupt you, but for folks who don't understand what the acronym RTP SCS is, could you explain a little bit about what it means? And
yeah, absolutely. I was just going to get there. So,
perfect.
Perfect timing. An RTP SCS. So first, let's kind of talk about what the RTP part of it means. So RTP stands for Regional Transportation Plan. And the RTP looks at how we, as in residents of San Joaquin County, will get around the county in the next 20 to 30 years. So the RTP looks at, what are the current transportation priorities of residents and leaders of our region. It also looks at, what are the population and job growth trends currently. It also looks at what are the historic levels of funding that we've received, either from, in San Joaquin County, transportation, and like many regions, transportation is funded through local taxes, as well as state funds, as well as federal funds. So the RTP kind of looks at what are the historic levels of funding that we've received, so that we can kind of predict how much money we'll have in the future. And then that helps us decide how to prioritize projects. And then in addition to revenue, we want to look at how these projects meet with the federal air quality conformity. So the Clean Air Act, for example, that's a piece of the RTP, making sure that our projects comply with federal regulations on air quality. So that's the RTP part. SES, which stands for Sustainable Community Strategy, that's kind of more of like a state piece. So in California, MPOs also developed the SES, which came into the picture when SB 375 was passed in 2008, I believe. And what this does is it ties these transportation investments, the ones that are identified in the RTP, to land use patterns in our jurisdiction. So the reason why California is looking at tying transportation with land use is because the state of California has some really ambitious goals about reducing greenhouse gas, and also how many miles we drive per capita. These are things that are helping the state of California kind of meet its climate action goals into the future. So that's the RTP SCS. So the RTP part is like more on the federal side, and the SCS is kind of in addition. The state of California is asking MPOs to include this with their RTP so that there's more coordination with land use with transportation improvement.
Okay, great.
Does that help answer the question there?
Definitely. And so why is this important? I mean, I know that you just talked about meeting California's greenhouse gas emission reduction goals. But what would be another reason why it's so important, especially you as a planner? Why would you feel like this is something that's important?
I think for me, I always think of the human impact. So with a plan like this, for example, it's going to shape how our region invests in transportation. Like that's from the planning side, but from the human side, from the resident side, it really impacts how and where we live, how we work, and how do we get to and from our houses and to our offices in the future. So like think about freeways and public transit and other transportation infrastructure that are part of your community, the places where you live. They have a significant effect on your quality of life, how you access your job, how do you get to school, how do you get to your house, your community services, for example, or how do you get to your local park? You know, those are the transportation really impacts your access to all of these things. So that's kind of like the human side of the planning process.
Okay, great. And so how does this connect to environmental justice? I know we hear this term very often. And so I want folks to understand a little bit more of what that environmental justice component is within the Regional Transportation Sustainable Community Strategy. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Sure, I can kind of touch base on some of the things that environmental justice may mean in this case. So from my understanding, environmental justice focuses on the fair treatment of all people, regardless of race, color, national origin, or income. And then in relation to the regional planning process, environmental justice means that there is a fair and equitable distribution of the benefits and burdens of the RTP SCS between our disadvantaged communities when compared to the remainder of the region. And so when I mention disadvantaged communities, I'm kind of speaking more towards communities where we see like higher rates of poverty or a concentration of minority populations, for example. In planning, we'll look at communities where we see these higher levels and we'll kind of call them our disadvantaged communities so that we can look at a map and make sure that we're analyzing how we're impacting these communities with our plans. So that's kind of how we address environmental justice in the RTP SCS. Per federal regulations and state regulations, we also have to kind of perform analysis around these things. And so that's why it's important for us to identify and map where these communities are, because we'll look at different indicators like access to high quality transit and access to jobs and exposure to air pollution as different performance measures when we're looking at the environmental justice impacts of a plan or a strategy. So if you look at our 2018 draft plan, you can kind of see our analysis and conclusions around environmental justice and civil rights in our Appendix Q, which you can find on our website. And I can provide that if people are looking for it.
Great. No, thank you. That's very helpful. And then, so how does the Regional Transportation Sustainable Community Strategy, how does it directly affect community residents? How would you kind of get people to say, okay, I want to participate in the process. This is how it directly impacts my community. I know you mentioned, it's the way people get to and from work, school, parks, recreational, but how does it directly affect communities? Or is that too of a broad question, do you think?
It's not too broad. I think when you're trying to advocate for yourself and for your community, I think it's important to look at your daily experience, think about what are the challenges in your commute to work or school, and kind of take that as your the foundation of building up your story when you're trying to impact policy and advocate for your community. So I think that's always a good place to start, and so that's what I would recommend for folks who want to get more involved and want to see the direct connection to their day-to-day life.
Okay, so it would be like the challenges that they face in regards to transportation and land use and affordable housing, right?
Right.
Kind of look around and see if, they're getting those types of services on a daily basis that meet their needs, right? Because they have to meet their needs.
Right. Yeah, it's always about what are your needs, what are your priorities, what are the things, what are the barriers or the challenges that are in place right now that maybe a planning agency can affect in their long range plans. So that's always a good place to start before, as a foundation before getting involved. Everyone has, yeah.
As far as you mentioned that you're in the process of updating it. Could you tell us about the current updates on the process, like where the COG is at this point?
Sure. So we're in April, mid to late April right now. SJCOG released our draft 2018 RTP SCS for public review in early March, and we're scheduled to close out our public comment period this Thursday, actually, April 26th at 4 p.m. at our monthly board meeting. And but that doesn't mean that the process is over. Through this Thursday, we're still taking comments, so you can either mail your comments via snail mail to SJCOG. You can email your comments as well, and I can provide information at the end of this so that people know where and how to send their comments in. You can fax your comments if you're still able to do that. And last but not least, you can still show up on Thursday at 4 p.m. at our board meeting and participate in the public hearing process. Kind of give your words to our board members as well as to our staff, because we'll all be in attendance kind of listening in on what are the concerns of the community. So that's through April 26th, this Thursday. But beyond that, the RTP is just kind of a continual cycle. Every 4 years, we update this plan. And in between each update, we're working on things to implement the plan. And so whether you want to be involved in the planning process itself, we have different kinds of opportunities in the future, or if you want to be involved in the implementation side of things, like how do we put these projects on the ground, and how do we move forward on implementing greenhouse gas reduction in San Joaquin County. Those are things that we're going to continually be working on, and we always have committees and opportunities like that for people to plug in if they so choose. And I'm your friendly planner, and I can help you find a way to get involved.
And this is after it's been adopted, correct?
Correct. But we also have our current plan in place, the 2014 plan. So it's just always kind of moving forward throughout time. So
yeah, no. And could you go through like a quick timeline of how it, like when it started? When did this current process that you're closing out, like could you give folks an idea of as far as like how long that process takes, so that they kind of have an understanding of, the gradual progression of it?
I'd say we probably kicked off our early public engagement portion of this 2018 plan in mid 2016. That was when we, I think we kicked off our advisory group around that time. And then 2017, so last year around this time, we were going full force with our public engagement, kind of out in the community, working on survey collection, trying to be present at community events to kind of introduce the RTP SCS and get community feedback on it. So since 2017, we've been pretty active on the public engagement side of things, trying to get feedback from residents all over the county.
And I know you guys implemented a new survey online, correct? That was used to do a little bit more of the outreach, and I think that was helpful too.
Yeah, in this 2018 process, we introduced the MetroQuest tool, which was an online kind of educational tool, and then also a survey tool, but it was kind of subtle in the way that it asked questions. It was more about like helping people understand the process and learn how a plan can impact land use or transportation investment. And then throughout the tool, you could interact with it, and then as you interact, the tool would gather your input. And so with that input, we use that to help shape the 2018 plan. So that was a really exciting tool, and we're glad to hear feedback that it was a positive experience for some of your residents.
No, definitely. I know that I used it, and it was pretty accessible. It was easy to understand. There was like no issue that I felt going through that whole survey. So thank you for doing that. That was great.
Thank you.
I know. We're hoping, yeah, that's great. That hopefully you'll be using that same tool in the next round, correct? That would be great.
It would be a great goal to continue it forward, but it always depends on our resources that we have available. So we got lucky this time, and I'm hoping we can make the case for assuring that we have resources for it next time.
And I think another great thing too is that a lot of the material was in different languages, and so it didn't matter if English was not your first language, you could access the same information. And so I thought that was great too. And yeah. So anything else before we close this out, Christine? I know we talked about next steps and how people can get involved in the next round, but you also mentioned that during the implementation phase, they can also participate. Is there workshops that are going to be taking place throughout the implementation process, or is this, it, and we're not going to hear about the process until the next round?
That's hopefully not it. I would say a good way to keep in touch with us is to follow us on social media, because then you'll see kind of the different activities going on with SJCOG. A lot of it has to do with kind of moving our transportation system forward, which is a big part of the RTP SCS. And so if folks want to hear about our workshops or any committee opportunities or things like that, you can find us on Facebook, you can find us on LinkedIn. We're also on Instagram and Twitter, of course. And then if you want more kind of hardy news, you can find us on WordPress as well. So all those avenues are rich with information on how you can get involved and kind of follow us along as we implement the RTP SCS.
And I think also too, for folks to come out to the policy board meetings, right? They take place every month, and
they do.
Opportunity to like educate yourself on like what's taking place in your community. So I think that's also a great idea as well.
I think come to like 1 or 2 board meetings, and you'll, especially back to back, you'll start to like understand and learn the dynamics of regional planning and how important this forum is for San Joaquin County, not just the city of Stockton, but all of the players in our region are there at this forum, and a regional conversation, a bigger regional conversation is always being had about transportation's impact on our local and regional economy, which is all very important for environmental justice.
No, definitely. So, well, thank you so much, Christine. Would you like to share anything else before we close out this interview? And we'd appreciate all the staff's hard work. I know we were involved in some of that process. I know Yoli was, and so we just thank you for being so accessible.
Sure, no problem. I will plug that coming up in early May, we have a seminar on some emerging technologies in transportation, which folks might be interested in learning about. So we're going to have speakers talk about, autonomous vehicles and what their impact might be in San Joaquin County. So if anyone's interested in that, I think May 2nd here at SJCOG around lunchtime. It's brown bag, so you can bring your own lunch, or you can RSVP and we can order a lunch. I think there's a cost associated with that, but it should be really interesting.
Yeah, no, definitely. Changing times. Well, thank you so much, and we appreciate all the great information, and we look forward to working with you all.
Thanks, Veronica. Thanks,
Bye.
Catholic Charities.
Have a great day, Christine.